The evenings in our neighborhood often resonated with a gentle familiarity, with the sprinklers clicking on in rhythmic bursts, a distant dog barks, settling down for the night, while the low murmur of a television drifts from an open window. Mine was part of it. At 47, having navigated life alone since Mark's passing 5 years prior, the rhythm of routine had transformed into both solace and confinement. I toiled away at my position in the county records office, steady, serene, and unchanging, much like my evenings, returned home, prepared a solitary dinner, perhaps delved into a book or became engrossed in a classic film on television. Wash, repeat. My neighbor Bob was woven into that familiar cadence. Robert Kincaid resided next door for what must have been 15 years, yet our interactions were limited to mere pleasantries exchanged over the shared hedge or a casual wave as one of us departed from the driveway. He was perhaps a decade or so my senior, having retired from a career that seemed to revolve around engineering, or so I recall someone mentioning once. His lawn was a picture of perfection, and his house stood as a testament to meticulous care. A solitary figure, his face etched with the marks of time, typically adorned with a baseball cap, most often a plain navy blue, occasionally bearing the words Vietnam Veteran. His presence was unwavering, as steadfast as the ancient oak tree that graced his front lawn. We were not friends, not in any true sense. Only fellow inhabitants of the vicinity, vessels gliding gracefully through the tranquil suburban night. That specific evening began much like any other late August night. The air enveloped me heavy and warm, clinging to the remnants of the day's heat, infused with the earthy aroma of dry grass and the delicate sweetness of night sky petunias blooming in pots on my modest back patio. The crickets were preparing their evening concerto. After completing my solitary dinner, I resolved to address the task of deadheading the rose bushes that adorned the fence separating our properties. The sound of the shears was soothing, the touch of the thorny stems a reminder of nature's resilience, while the velvety softness of a faded bloom rested gently in my palm. The setting sun adorned the sky with hues of bruised purples and fiery oranges, a breathtaking spectacle for a solitary observer. Engrossed in my musings, I found myself softly murmuring to a particularly obstinate cluster of withered blooms, a habit I had adopted, conversing with my plants as if they were cherished companions, when a gentle cough broke the silence behind me. I sat up, taken aback, gripping my shears tightly. Bob stood poised on his side of the low chain-link fence, his hands gently resting on the top rail. He typically didn't find himself wandering the streets at this hour. The glow of his porch light stretched shadows across the ground, rendering his expression elusive at first glance. "Good evening, Sarah," he remarked, his voice low and slightly gravelly, as was his custom. "Oh, Bob, evening," I replied, attempting to maintain a casual demeanor, though my heart raced slightly from the unexpected encounter, as I busied myself with the roses, tidying them up just a bit. I waved the shears in a loose, uncertain manner. "They appear quite splendid this year," he remarked, his eyes gliding over the foliage. "You take good care of them." I offered a faint smile, doing my best. "They possess a certain flair for the dramatic, yet they are undeniably worth the endeavor. Typically, that would be where the story ends. A slight nod, perhaps a remark on the approaching weather, and we would part ways into our distinct realms. Yet Bob remained still. He stood there, gazing not entirely at the roses, but something beyond them. He passed them, his voice steady, towards me. An unusual stillness enveloped him. The familiar space between us crackled with an unexpected energy, a subtle vibration of something unspoken. strain, uncertainty. I adjusted my stance, a wave of self-awareness washing over me in my worn gardening attire, likely adorned with traces of earth on my cheek. "Everything all right, Bob?" He inhaled deeply, his gaze finally locking onto mine. His eyes, a clear pale blue, held a certain depth. "Troubled?" "No, not troubled. Feels more akin to a quest." "Sarah?" He started to speak, but then hesitated. He cleared his throat once more. "There's an observation I've made. It's been on my mind for some time now." My thoughts surged forward. Had I allowed the grass to grow too wild along the fence line? Was my recycling bin once more brimming to the top? We had never encountered any problems, not a single grievance throughout all these years. "Oh," I inquired, maintaining a cheerful tone, even as a tight knot of unease formed in my stomach. He inclined his body ever so slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper, despite the absence of any other soul nearby. The closeness of the gesture was peculiar, unforeseen. It's the manner in which you converse with them." I blinked. "I apologize." "The roses," he specified, gesturing toward the bush I had been nurturing, "and the other plants on occasion. When you're out here, particularly in the evenings when you believe no one is nearby." A warmth rose to my cheeks. Oh Lord! He had listened to my absurd, one-sided dialogues with the petunias and the obstinate rose bushes. What a mortifying situation! I likely came across as an utter madman. I parted my lips, ready to fumble through an explanation, perhaps even a self-deprecating quip. Yet he raised a hand, a subtle gesture, halting my advance. His expression held neither mockery nor amusement. It was grave, profoundly grave, and within his gaze, a glimmer of vulnerability emerged, quelling my sense of embarrassment. "Don't," he murmured gently. "Don't feel ashamed. That's not the reason I'm saying this." He paused, collecting his thoughts, as the crickets appeared to chirp more loudly in the unexpected stillness. The glow of the porch light illuminated the silver strands in his hair. He fixed his gaze on me, unwavering and intense, and uttered the words that stole the breath from my lungs, paving the way for a night beyond anything I could have ever envisioned. "It's simply that I believe I grasp the reasons behind your actions. And I need to share something I've never revealed to another living soul." I stood frozen, the sheer strangling forgotten from my grasp, the sharp scent of crushed rose leaves mingling with the cooling air. Stunned, Bob Kincaid, the reserved man next door, the guardian of the immaculate lawn, grasped the reason behind my conversations with my plants. He harbored a secret. The crickets, once a mere backdrop, now pierced the heavy silence that enveloped us, each chirp resonating like a hammer against the stillness. I don't understand, Bob," I finally stammered, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. The knot in my stomach tightened, yet it had transformed from mere apprehension into something more complex. Curiosity, keen and relentless, cut through it. He adjusted his stance, his eyes falling to the hands that lay upon the fence rail. His knuckles stood out, the skin roughened, bearing the marks of countless days spent toiling under the sun. "It's difficult to put into words," he whispered, glancing upward. The porch light illuminated the creases that framed his pale blue eyes, lines of experience perhaps tinged with sadness. "Seeing you out here brought to mind Eleanor. Eleanor, his spouse. She departed from this world perhaps 7 or 8 years prior, before Mark's time. I had not been well acquainted with her, merely exchanging the occasional wave and engaging in fleeting conversations about the weather. In her final days, she had grown increasingly delicate. Bob had devoted himself to her care with unwavering dedication. Every soul in the neighborhood was aware of that fact. He seldom spoke of her. She used to converse with the birds," he continued, a subtle, nearly imperceptible smile gracing his lips. "Not merely scattering breadcrumbs. She engaged in complete dialogues, sharing the details of her day. She inquired if they had encountered anything captivating during their journeys, especially the cardinals. She adored the cardinals." He paused, his gaze wandering towards the darkening sky, as if he might catch sight of one even now. "I would playfully poke fun at her for it in a light-hearted way, you see." She referred to them as her feathered confidants. Yet, as time wore on and her outings became scarce, those birds and the exchanges they sparked became essential to her existence. I believe a fragment of her still endures. A fragment that sought connection, even as the world condensed to the mere perspective offered by the window. My breath caught in my throat. I reflected on my own tranquil evenings, where the soft hum of the television could not quite bridge the void left by Mark, and how nurturing my garden often felt like the sole dialogue that truly resonated. It was never about anticipating a response from the roses. It was a matter of expressing thoughts, releasing emotions into the universe, even if the only witnesses were the whispering leaves and the fading light of the sun. Once she had departed, Bob continued, his voice descending into a husky whisper, laden with emotion, as the silence enveloped the house. It was vast, a source of tension. At times, I would find myself gazing out the window where she once sat, observing the bird feeder, and I would indeed begin conversing with them as well. He gazed straight into my eyes then, a stark sincerity reflected in his gaze that ensnared me completely. Not in the manner Eleanor did, incomplete dialogues, merely recognizing their presence. Morning red I could whisper to a cardinal, or a bustling day, to the sparrow bickering over the seeds. Perhaps foolish, one might say. Yet it resonated, essential, as if resisting the void. He tilted his head ever so slightly, a gesture tinged with self-awareness. When I listen to you, Sarah, conversing with your roses, I don't perceive madness. I listen, yet I remain uncertain. A figure traversing the stillness, a solitary soul nurturing a bond, even if it's merely with a tenacious flower. The atmosphere pulsed with the weight of his revelation. The straightforward yet deep acknowledgement lingered in the air, creating a connection more personal than any coffee shared or barbecue enjoyed in the neighborhood. The flush of embarrassment had dissipated entirely, giving way to a profound surge of unexpected empathy. Before me stood this man, a neighbor whose presence had been little more than a whisper in my life, now unearthing a fragment of his sorrow, his solitude, reflecting my own silent emotions in a manner I had never expected. "Bob," I murmured gently, reclaiming my voice once more, "I appreciate you sharing that with me. It is far from foolish. It seems to me that I grasp the essence of your message." He offered a subtle, nearly undetectable nod, a wave of relief easing the creases around his eyes. We lingered for a moment longer, a delicate understanding forming a fragile bridge over the fence, spanning years of courteous separation. The vibrant hues of orange and purple had dissipated from the heavens, yielding to a profound velvety indigo, punctuated by the emergence of the initial stars. The light from his porch appeared to radiate a cozier warmth in that moment. "However, that's not the primary point I wished to convey," he remarked, his voice recovering some of its previous fervor. He inhaled once more, reminiscent of a diver readying himself to dive into the abyss below. What I must express is a sentiment Eleanor shared with me long ago, a secret she urged me to keep. Yet, in your presence it feels vital, essential, akin to conversing with the birds. He paused, studying my expression, possibly measuring my response, perhaps fortifying his resolve. The crickets continued their relentless chirping, unaware of the world around them. The atmosphere hummed with a palpable tension, anticipation simmering just below the serene facade of the quiet suburban evening. Whatever words were on the brink of escaping his lips, I sensed deep within that they would alter far more than the tranquil cadence of my nights. It resembled the gradual movement of tectonic plates, profound, deliberate, and unchangeable. She recounted how he began, then hesitated, his eyes meeting mine, conveying a remarkable blend of fragility and determination. She recounted a night, one that preceded my acquaintance with her, a night that transformed her existence entirely. In listening to you, I came to a profound realization. Perhaps you are the sole individual who truly comprehends. Comprehend? Who, me? What could Eleanor Kinkett, a woman I scarcely knew, have gone through that Bob believed I, Ichika, the reserved widow next door, would uniquely understand? My thoughts were a void, incapable of summoning any potential ideas. The night enveloped everything in a profound stillness, the distant chirping of crickets fading into a mere whisper as I concentrated solely on Bob, poised in anticipation. The fragrance of my roses appeared more potent, more substantial. Bob edged nearer to the fence, his voice sinking to a whisper, laced with a sense of secrecy, yet burdened by the echoes of the past. Eleanor. She was not always the serene figure, quietly knitting by the window, that most people in this town recall. In her youth, long before our paths crossed, she endured a challenging period. Her initial betrothed, he never returned from Korea. It broke her into pieces. I inclined my head with deliberation. Such a profound loss. Indeed, that is clear to me. The yawning chasm that remained, the universe dulled to a muted gray, enveloped in an eerie silence. She seemed to float away. Bob pressed on, his eyes unfocused, lost in memories of days gone by. She distanced herself from her family for a time, accepting a position in a quaint coastal town far to the north. I was a stranger in a sea of unfamiliar faces. She remarked that it was the most solitary period she had ever experienced. In a sense, it was a deeper solitude than the sorrow itself, for the sorrow at least carried with it a sense of engagement. It was merely a void. He lingered, his thumb gliding thoughtfully along the upper wire of the fence. She toiled as a server in this quaint diner. Endless hours just managing to get by. The nights were the most challenging. She resided in a quaint little room perched above a bustling shop. The only sounds that pierced the silence were the whispering wind and the faint call of a distant foghorn. He cast a glance over his shoulder, his pale eyes probing into mine once more. On a fateful night, a fierce storm unleashed its fury. The wind howled fiercely, rain lashed relentlessly, and darkness enveloped much of the town as the power flickered and failed. Fear gripped her as she curled up in her small room, a profound sense of isolation enveloping her, leaving her feeling entirely abandoned. She expressed a sensation of impending dissolution into the darkness. The image was striking, haunting. The chill, the dread, the oppressive burden of solitude she must have experienced was almost palpable. Then, Bob said, his voice gentle, there was a knock at her door. My heart leaped with a sudden thrill. Amidst a tempest? The power has gone out. She hesitated on the brink of silence, Yet it pressed on, unyielding, calmly persistent, not hurried. At long last she eased the door open just a crack. The bookshop downstairs was presided over by the old man, Lucas, a solitary figure for the most part. He scarcely exchanged a word with anyone, perpetually lost in the pages of his books. Bob adjusted his stance, resting his forearms on the fence. In the dimly lit hallway he stood, a candle stub clutched in one hand and a saucer in the other, wax likely dripping onto his skin. He simply gazed at her and remarked, his voice ringing out over the howling wind, "The storm is rather fierce, wouldn't you agree? It is truly disheartening to find oneself alone in such dreary weather. I have prepared a cup of tea. Would you like to enjoy a cup? Purchase candlelight." Bob exhaled gently, releasing a measured breath. Eleanor remarked that she simply gazed at him. This man, a mere acquaintance, this reserved and solitary presence. In that instant, as the candlelight danced across his features and his soothing voice filled the air, she was enveloped by an intense feeling, not quite of rescue but rather of an undeniable bond. A beacon cast into the shadows, he cast his gaze downward, a subtle quiver betraying his grip. She descended to his establishment. The room was enveloped in shadows, with books piled high in every corner, the aroma of aged paper and dust lingering in the air, mingling with the warmth of the tea he had prepared on a small camping stove. Conversation was sparse between them, almost non-existent. By the flickering glow of candlelight, he recited poetry with a voice that danced through the shadows. It was Tennyson, she mused. His voice carried an unexpected depth. She sat quietly, tea in hand, observing the shadows as they twirled gracefully upon the walls. The tempest howled beyond the walls, yet within that small haven of flickering candlelight and whispered conversations, she expressed a newfound sense of safety, visibility, and a comforting companionship that eased her solitude. He lapsed into silence. The crickets returned to their relentless cadence. The streetlight at the corner threw elongated, skeletal shadows that danced across the pavement, shaped by the gnarled branches of the trees. I became aware that I was unconsciously holding my breath. The narrative unfolded in a manner that was far from the jarring revelation I had anticipated. There are no controversies, no grand theatrics, yet it was deeply personal. An unanticipated bond between individuals, forged in a fleeting instance of profound vulnerability. Two solitary spirits discovering fleeting comfort amidst the tempest. That night lingered in her memory, Bob remarked softly. She remarked that it didn't miraculously erase her grief or alleviate her loneliness, yet it stirred something within her, illuminating the truth that connection could emerge in the most unforeseen manners from the most surprising individuals. All it required was the courage to slightly ajar the door, even in the face of fear. He gazed directly at me, his demeanor sincere. She recounted that tale perhaps 2 decades into our union. She mentioned that she held it close, as it felt deeply personal and quietly defining, and she asked me to promise not to share it casually. Yet Bob hesitated, his mind sifting through the possibilities for the perfect expression. "It's delightful to hear you converse with your flowers, Sarah." It brought to mind her conversations with the birds, and it conjured the image of Mr. Abernethy serving tea in the shadows, seeking bonds wherever possible, breaking the stillness. He let out a heavy sigh, a resonant sound that echoed with the weight of countless unvoiced reflections. I suppose I merely wished for you to be aware of that. I perceive your presence. Perhaps it is perfectly acceptable to seek comfort in gentle exchanges, be it with blooming roses, chirping birds, or even a friendly neighbor leaning over the fence on a balmy evening. The admission lingered in the atmosphere, straightforward, deep, and completely unforeseen. He had woven Eleanor's narrative into something more profound. He had offered a glimpse into his comprehension, his compassion. He perceived my subtle way of managing life's challenges not as mere oddity, but as a shared endeavor in the pursuit of connection. In sharing Eleanor's story, he, much like Mr. Abernethy, provided a subtle companionship amidst the solitude we both, in our unique manners, traversed. The narrow expanse between our homes, typically a mere stretch of grass and a chain-link barrier, transformed into sacred territory, imbued with a sense of shared vulnerability and the lingering spirit of a kindness exchanged long ago amidst a tempest. The gravity of Bob's words regarding Eleanor's tale enveloped me. It lacked the weight of sorrow, yet it was anchoring, reminiscent of a cozy blanket on a crisp night. He had woven a tale for me. He had granted me a rare insight into his innermost feelings, revealing the serene terrain of his marriage and the weight of his sorrow. He had observed my solitary, somewhat unconventional quirk, and rather than casting judgment, he extended a hand of understanding, shaped by his own experiences. It was a gesture of remarkable compassion, surprising and profoundly touching. "Robert," I began, my voice heavy with an unexpected surge of emotion. I cleared my throat, hoping he would grasp the significance of his words. "That ranks among the most generous gestures I have ever received, distributing that information, entrusting me with Eleanor's memory, along with your own emotions." I cast my eyes over the fence, locking onto his gaze beneath the gentle illumination of his porch light. "My sincere gratitude. Truly, it signifies more than words can express." A faint smile graced his lips once more, this time illuminating his eyes and crinkling the edges with warmth. Eleanor often remarked that connection has a way of revealing itself, as fluid as water. At times, all it requires is the gentle opening of a channel. He waved his hand aimlessly in the space that separated us, in the expanse between our 2 yards, our 2 isolated existences. It seemed she was indeed correct. We lingered in a serene quietude for a moment, a stillness that bore no resemblance to the courteous, somewhat uncomfortable pauses that had marked our 15 years of neighborly existence. The crickets sang their evening song, while the leaves of the maple tree danced in a sudden gust, and the distant hum of the city seemed to fade into the background. There we were, 2 souls positioned by a fence line, beneath the expansive tapestry of stars, having transcended years of triviality in one profound exchange. With a sudden clarity, I recalled the shears nestled in my grip and gently set them down in the vacant terracotta pot at my side. The gesture resembled the release of a heavy weight, a relinquishing of the rigid self-imposed barriers I had encased myself in since Mark's passing. Bob rose from the fence, elongating his body with a gentle stretch. "Well," he said, his tone shifting slightly, becoming lighter yet still warm. "It's getting late. I should probably let you get back to it. It seems I have intruded upon your serene moment of tending to the garden." "It's all right," I replied hastily. This experience was, without a doubt, far superior to the task of deadheading roses, trust me. He let out a soft chuckle, a warm rumbling sound that was reassuring to hear. He paused, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face for the briefest moment, then surged forward, reminiscent of his initial leap into the conversation. "Sarah, yes, I typically brew a pot of coffee around 9 in the morning, peruse the paper on my back deck, provided the weather is pleasant. Nothing extravagant." His gaze met mine, filled with a question yet also extending a straightforward invitation. Should you find yourself with a moment to spare and a desire for companionship, I would be delighted to have you join me. At times, there it lay, the unforeseen twist, not a grand proclamation, nor a momentous occasion in the theatrical sense, but rather something modest, straightforward, and profoundly transformative within the tapestry of our interconnected lives. A coffee, organization, an open door extended softly, unforced, reminiscent of Lucas's tea presented to Eleanor amidst the tempest. It was Bob reaching out into the stillness, recognizing the mutual longing for connection he had so artfully articulated. My heart fluttered, a warmth blossoming in my chest that had nothing to do with the residual August heat. For 5 years I had resided here in solitude, largely withdrawn, allowing the silence to deepen around me. And now behold this invitation, ignited by the whispers of talking roses and the beauty of shared vulnerability. "Robert," I remarked, a true smile blossoming on my face, as effortless and inviting as the evening primrose unfurling in the vicinity. "I would greatly appreciate that." "Thank you very much." Relief spread across his face, evident even in the soft shadows. "Good," he remarked with a simplicity that spoke volumes. "Take your time, no rush at all." "I will remember that," I responded with sincerity. He offered a final nod, a gesture that now resonated with camaraderie instead of dismissal. "Very well then, good night, Sarah." "Good night, Bob," I murmured gently. He pivoted and made his way back to his home, his footsteps firm upon the flagstone path. The screen door let out a gentle creak as he stepped inside, and moments later, a warm glow began to emanate from his kitchen window. I lingered in that moment long after he had departed, gazing at the roses, the fence, and the stillness of the neighboring house, which now seemed to blend into the very fabric of my surroundings. The atmosphere of the night was charged with an unusual essence. It felt more buoyant, infused with a sense of potential. The words my neighbor uttered that night left me utterly astonished. "It is not merely the tale of Eleanor and Lucas. It is also about the subtle bravery he exhibited in revealing it, the compassion he extended, and the profound human bond he provided. It transcended mere comprehension of my conversations with my plants. It was about him perceiving me, the individual concealed beneath the monotony, behind the serene exterior. In that act, he had managed to diminish my sense of invisibility, to ease my solitude. No, you likely wouldn't believe what transpired, for it lacked the volume and spectacle one might expect. On an unremarkable Tuesday evening, a hushed intimacy unfolded over the garden fence. Yet it altered something essential. It gently pried open a door I hadn't even known was sealed so firmly. As I finally turned to enter, leaving the slumbering roses beneath the stars, I sensed that my once predictable evenings might soon take on a new hue. Perhaps by tomorrow at around 9 they might. It seemed to embody a subtle miracle in its own right.